The following webinar was recorded on October 29th, 2020. Thank you for joining us today for Sensitive Data Protection, a critical component of your data. Our host today is Corinne Blair, IMT's industry consultant for Health and Human Services. Take it away, Corinne.
Thanks, Tyson. Well, hello, everybody, and I'd like to again welcome you to our webinar on sensitive data protection, a critical component to your data governance strategy. I'd like to start off with introducing myself and the team today. My name is Corinne Blair, and I am the Data Governance Practice Lead and Industry Consultant at IMT. I have extensive experience in healthcare IT, with over 30 years experience in healthcare IT delivery, as well as IT management and data governance. For those of you that may not know enough about IMT, we are recognized as an industry leader in identity solution experts, and we've successfully deployed over 200 plus enterprise identity solutions in healthcare, human services, e-government, and integrated justice. I'm also going to introduce to you Mark Rowan and Kevin Downey. Mark Rowan, he is the Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Data Sentinel. Mark brings over 30 years of experience building and managing software and services teams in the areas of data and analytics. Kevin Downey, he is the Chief Technical Officer and also a co-founder at Data Sentinel. And Kevin has over 25 years experience in information management field, specializing in data strategy, right fit architectures, and enterprise data management. Kevin and Mark will both speak today on Data Sentinel and how its enterprise sensitive data management platform can help you to identify, inventory, classify, tag sensitive information, discover duplicate data in your organization, audit your data quality, as well as measure data risk, automate DSAR, and enable data governance. As part of your MDM implementation, IMT quite often provides data governance consulting services to help guide your implementation. We typically are engaged in the project to help set direction and seek alignment for business processes and standards and operational requirements. We'll provide three areas of focus: strategic, operational, and monitoring and support. We'll provide guidance on establishing information standards and data sharing agreement. We'll help you to set policy, definition to support your privacy and security and regulatory laws. We'll help define data stewardship framework, including roles and responsibilities to maintain data quality and to support the data quality target. We'll help define comprehensive stakeholder agreements, which is really important to ensure all parties are committed to data quality. And we'll also help establish an operational framework to support your organization's policy goals and procedures and training. In this slide, it becomes the source of truth for the sharing of enterprise demographics across your organization. So it's really important that you understand where your data is being sent and where it's being stored. So often we find the sensitive data like PHI and regulated data being stored and utilized in many other places. Some of these are examples that we see where you could set policy, monitor and enforce data quality and compliance, such as emails, contract tracing, COVID-19 reporting, and chat messaging. So here you could track your sensitive data or clinical data that's contained in these forms. You could also measure the risk and enable active data governance. Here's a very good example of the platforms of regulatory regulations and compliance. There are many state and federal laws that often enforce penalties for non-compliance. So there's clear data destruction policies in place and explicit content and or opt-out requirements for data sharing. So data privacy is an enterprise-wide issue that can lead to significant business interruption and financial losses if not addressed properly. So we've just listed a few. And here I'm going to pass the baton over to Mark Rowan, who's going to talk about Data Sentinel and provide us some insight into its capabilities. Mark?
Thank you, Corinne, and hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. So Data Sentinel at its core is a sensitive information intelligence platform. And the core capability of the technology, as Corinne mentioned earlier, is to do deep discovery using a deep learning engine that we've created that identifies, tags, inventories, and classifies your sensitive data assets across the organization, no matter the data source or the type of data. It has the ability to look at everything from structured data to unstructured, semi-structured data, so images, to PDFs, to Word, across all kinds of different systems, from traditional warehouses, data lakes, data stores, into file stores. So pretty much everything that you could possibly imagine where data is held within enterprise and organizations today. The nature of the technology is such that it is extremely scalable. So it's enterprise grade, the ability to be able to handle up to petabytes of data across the types of sources that we just described. But really the cornerstone capability of the technology is its ability to be persistent within the organization. So it's always running, always tracking and monitoring what you deem to be sensitive data within your organization. So it's extremely flexible as well in that it can accommodate what is sensitive information to you and your organization. And it does that, you think about it almost like a virus scanner for enterprise that's looking for those assets as they move around the organization and calling out exceptions to policies, because the core engine has a policy capability to it that Kevin's going to speak to in a moment. And that gives you the ability to know in near real time when those exceptions occur, so you can take remediation actions and obviously protect and lower the risk that those data assets may expose to the organization. So in today's demonstration, we're going to walk through a typical scenario that we see in the real world. We have a set of data that consists of treatment information and private individual information that would be considered highly sensitive. But we've set up the policies within Data Sentinel to allow that data to exist without infraction in a protected space where that data is necessary to operate the business and is well protected. But in our scenario, we're going to run Data Sentinel and those policies that I just talked about across other data holdings within the organization, looking for elements of those treatment information or those treatment data and the PII associated with that to see what we come up with and to ensure that those elements don't pop up in places where they're not supposed to be. And Kevin's going to walk you through that use case. So without further ado, Kevin, I'll transition over to you to talk a little bit about how this works and then show everybody the process.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Mark. The process starts out by simply telling Data Sentinel where to look for information within your organization. In our demonstration today, we've told Data Sentinel to look and to policy enforce information within a share used by a legal department. The next thing that Data Sentinel does is it will dispatch one or more data discovery processes. These are lightweight, containerized applications that sit anywhere you wish in your enterprise and scan it for any kind of objects that we want within the organization. It could be looking at structured sources like a database, unstructured sources like file systems with Word documents and PowerPoints and spreadsheets and pictures, or semi-structured areas within the organization, such as a data lake that has a variety of aspects within it. Once the data discovery process finds something, it goes into kind of a three-step analysis. The first thing we look at is metadata behind this object that we've discovered. If it's structured like a database and a table, we'll pull back the table information, like the column information and the structural characteristics of that column. If, on the other hand, it is a document, as an example, we'll pull back the metadata that's embedded within the document, such as who created it, when it was created, who last updated it, who last edited it, things like that. Once we've finished with the structural characteristics, which also records the size and location of the information, we'll then hand it over to our classification and inference engine. Here, as Mark pointed out, we use a various number of techniques, including deep learning, to understand the content of what's contained within those objects themselves. Not only can we classify and infer information that we build into the product, but we can extend that classification very, very easily to what's important to individual clients. In other words, the intellectual property or the type of information that individual clients want to manage within the organization. We can also subclassify information within that. So as an example, we recognize people out of the box, but we can ingest information from a client that tells us a little bit more about a person. As an example, this allows us to manage the information at a very fine level of granularity and to enforce governance policies within the organization that are very meaningful to each and every client individually. The next part of the process is to look at the data quality. This can take a number of forms, but one of the easiest to explain is in the example of, say, a credit card. We can, in addition to recognizing what a credit card looks like or the pattern of the credit card or even the image of a credit card, we can also see if the pattern or the digits that we're bringing back are actually meaningful. In other words, we can apply a checksum to them to understand that it's a real credit card as opposed to just a series of numbers that happens to look very similar. And lastly, all this information that we've gained is put into our repository and we can manage it through policy, which we're going to show you an example of right now. So let me just switch over and share my screen. Okay, so this is an example of Data Sentinel as an application, and we're going to take a very quick tour through the application. Obviously, we're just going to show you some highlights within it, but we need a little bit of time for follow-on and questions if we have time. So the first thing I mentioned earlier is that we've defined a policy within our system to enforce that medical information, in this case, treatment information, is not available outside of the protected area. So this is our policy edit window, and we can create any number of policies within the system. In this particular case, we created a policy with that objective that I just explained. We're looking in our legal area within our organization, and we are also looking only for objects or, be it documents or spreadsheets, only for objects that are contained within the legal area, personal information or information about a person, so that we know we're talking about a document that contains people. Within that subset, so the first part of the policy is defining what objects are managed by the policy, in this case, legal shares with people. The next part of the policy is to understand what would cause a violation of that policy. In other words, what are objects that aren't supposed to be there or data that isn't supposed to be there. In our case, for this simple example, it's easy. We want to know if there's a treatment code or a diagnosis code associated with it. So we're using ICD-10 codes. It could be a variety of things within the system, but just for simplicity, we're saying we want to know about all the objects that have an ICD code. So this is objects within a legal area that have people and an ICD code in the same document. So sensitive information that's contained there. You'll see that the policy is active within the system and that we have set the violation level to 10. Now, to give you an idea of what we've seen, I'm going to switch over to the report area within the interface. And this is our data inventory report, but I just want to give you a feel for the types of things that we've seen. So we said our Data Sentinel, it's taken a look at all of the objects that we've told it to look at, and it's classified objects within this inventory by type, in other words, document in this case, which is our high-level document type, as well as where it's located and the size of it. But we've also got an indication of the types of things that we've understood that reside within that document. So we see that in this particular case here, we've picked out a variety of things at different levels of classification. In our core system, green means that we understand that there is, and we've classified an element within the information, but it's not very sensitive in our estimation. All of it's highly customizable by individual clients, all the way up to red, which discovers a very sensitive item. We've also taken a look at the types of things we found. So in this case, we found things that pertain to legal references, people, locations, postal codes, and organizations. Organizations are similar to companies, as an example. We also have the ability right in this screen, as it's interactive, to drill in to find out more about what we've actually found. We bring back, just to give you an idea of the level of granularity, we bring back actual positional elements tied to a particular classification, tied to data. This allows our system to be part of a remediation process whereby if you didn't want, for whatever reason, this information to be in this place, you can immediately call a remediation process, which could do anything from emailing an individual to move the document, to automatically moving it, to some more complex remediation that you may have within your organization, such as de-identifying or redacting information. But all of this information is just an inventory. And in a large scale system, you don't want to have to go through all the data on a consistent basis. So instead, we've built the ability to only care about things that are, again, in violation of the policies that you've set out within your system. So going back to that one policy I showed you a moment ago, in terms of we want to know about all the treatment information in a particular area, this is a representation in a report format of that. And in here, we see that, in fact, there were two documents that we found. The one that's called sample medical transcript, used for the demo, one that's called an SRW that we wanted to embed something that shouldn't be there. We found two documents within the system. Although this is in a report, in a real life situation, this information would be immediately sent upon discovery to a remediation process. And as I mentioned earlier, it could be anything from an email through to part of a BPM process that you've set up for data governance within your organization. Just very quickly, a different way of looking at this, particularly if you didn't know what you're looking at. Let's say you were running this through the first time and you wanted a better way of visualizing what information was actually within the system. We can actually show you this same information, the same visualization from a graphical representation. In this particular case, what we're seeing here is a graphical representation of the directory structure. And you can see it's quite a complex directory structure that we've navigated through. We've started at the bottom and we've traversed through, and then we've found all the objects within all of the parents and subparents of that directory structure. We can also see, because we've color-coded it, the objects that may be of interest or that have violated, in this case, a policy. In this case, the two documents we saw earlier. We have the option of double-clicking into this document, and it will explode out its component parts. And we can see that of the things that we found an organization, so company information, person information, and the ICD information. We can click on the ICD information, find out a little bit more in terms of the fact that we've occurred once, and even drill in optionally to the actual position and the data we found at that location. This information, like the data, if you choose to have Data Sentinel return it back, which is optional, is stored as an encrypted index, and it's invaluable for things like data subject access request resolution, to know all the places that an individual, or particularly in this case treatment code, exist within your data, and have that indexed so that you can find it at the drop of a hat. With that, and this very quick tour through, I will turn it back to Mark to continue on the presentation.
Thank you, Kevin. So in that very quick demonstration, what we're showing is the system's ability to be able to find in near real time those sensitive data assets in places where they shouldn't be. Now, the way that our customers typically engage with us initially is through something that we call a deep discovery audit. It's where you have data sources. It could be an email system, and it could be a file share system. It could be, n number of different types of source data systems, where you're really uncomfortable with what is potentially in that data. You don't necessarily know what's there, but you really want to find out to minimize the risk of the organization, to ensure that there's nothing in there that shouldn't be in there. So the deep discovery audit is a rapid way to do the analysis of that particular system or systems, depending on what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and to audit that particular source to comply with the policies of the organization. So we do that in a very rapid manner to get from the point of discussion to the point of results is done within a 5-day period of time. And those results, the outputs associated with this audit, are extremely detailed. It's detail associated with what we found, what's against policy, where we found it, what exactly contained within that data, what are the associations of those data elements and where we found them. And then remediation recommendations. And that's the key to this is how did that occur in the first place? Through discussions, obviously, we'll come to that resolution. But what's necessary to remediate and to ensure that that doesn't occur as we go forward? So it's an extremely low-cost, rapid way to initiate these kinds of processes and to understand what is actually in your data. Why Data Sentinel? So what is the core function of the application and what it can do? So the element of technology is something that's new in our marketplace, leveraging deep learning to be able to do the type of analysis that Kevin was describing and to use it for the benefit of lowering risk for the organization is somewhat new in our business segment. But it's been built in such a way to scale. And scale to nth degree. We have the ability, as I mentioned, to handle petabytes of data, and that's based on the architecture that we've created and the ability to decouple the engines and put them out close to the data. The other thing that's somewhat interesting about how we've created this technology is around the concept of complete. Leaving no stone unturned is really the philosophy that we're going to market with, so that you have a full understanding, because any piece of data that shouldn't be in a particular place exposes the company to potential massive risk, especially with fines and litigation that seem to be happening across our marketplace right now. But of course, as Kevin showed, we've made it to be simple. So a business-oriented user can use the technology to find the information that they need. And I think the other element of it that's extremely important is how open and extensible it is, because the organizations have data governance infrastructure to a great degree in many places. They may have a GRC platform that they use to manage risk for the organization. We integrate with those technologies to do things like full accountability of risk for a company, as well as remediation, to leverage your current technology infrastructure to resolve the problems that we do find within those data assets. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Corinne, and we will work towards wrapping up.
Thanks, Mark and Kevin. That was really insightful and very, very, very good. I think we're going to just open the floor for any, if there's any questions or anything that we can address before we wrap.
We did receive one question. Samantha says, I may have missed this, but is Data Sentinel a separate purchasable program designed to mine a current database? And maybe we can talk a little bit more about how Data Sentinel complements our master data management solutions as well.
Yes, actually, there's a couple of ways to answer the question. So Data Sentinel is a standalone application and technology that can be integrated into your environment. So it's a piece of software, it's an application. But it also is an application that we leverage as a service. So Audit that I was describing earlier is something that we can use as a service to come in for a point period of time to help you resolve any potential doubts that may exist in the organization around your holdings. The ultimate objective is to have it operating in your environment over the long term, persistently, as I described it earlier. And of course, that would be a licensable technology.
Sounds good. And just to add to that, from the MDM perspective, it's certainly a value to know where your PHI is being captured and stored, because quite often you do have data stakeholder agreements on use and disclosure of PHI and sensitive data, but it's not always known where snippets of data is being stored or extracted or utilized in other forms. So very beneficial to know where your risks are, given HIPAA and other regulatory bodies that are now, it's imperative that you monitor your sensitive data and ensure you're mindful to the privacy laws in your area. Well, we'd love to hear back from you if anybody would like to have a further deep dive into Sentinel's capabilities in around your MDM implementation. I've added our contact information. My name is Corinne Blair here. Don't hesitate to reach out. Well, thank you, everybody. We really do appreciate your time and for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
you.
Thanks, everyone.